Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Maggie Moreland, and I am a certified holistic health practitioner, and I am extremely fascinated in women's health and wellness and all things women's health. Considering I've had my fair share of women health issues, I like to share my personal experiences here, as well as some of my thoughts and things that I've learned on my personal health and wellness journey. If you're new here, welcome. I really appreciate the support. But I just want to get right into what we're talking about today, and that is our period, and more importantly, what the heck is our period? Why do we bleed once a month? What is the point? What is the purpose? What is it? I want to know. I'm sure you want to know too. I know that personally for me, I grew up hating my period, for lack of a better word, because in our culture it is extremely demonized and frowned upon. We look at this time of the month as something that is inconvenient, uncomfortable, and not necessary. But today I wanted to talk about why our period is necessary, what our period could be telling us, debunk some things around PMS, and I'd also like to talk about what exactly our period is. So I'm sure you're all familiar, if you're a female, with the monthly cycle, your monthly cycle. So once a month you bleed. And if you are a woman in her reproductive years, which is from the first time you get your period, which is usually around age 12 to 14, until menopause, then you have a period. You bleed once a month. But there's a lot more to our cycle than just this period when we're bleeding or when we're on our period. So our hormones actually fluctuate throughout the entire month. So our period starts on the first day that we bleed, and it doesn't end, or a monthly cycle doesn't end until the next time we start our bleed. And as we're going through the days and the weeks of this monthly cycle, our hormones are fluctuating and changes are happening in our body. And the reason this is happening is for reproduction. Yes, you've guessed it, our period is a sign that we can reproduce and that our bodies can get pregnant or want to be pregnant. So having a period is a pretty good sign. So like I said, first day of your period is when the first day that you bleed. So a normal cycle, and I use air quotes because everybody's cycle is different, but a normal cycle is said to be from 28 to 35 days. But the closer you are to 30, probably is more normal than 35 or less than that. And you go through many different phases during your cycle. So you have your menstruation, which is typically 3 to 5 days long, and that is the period when you're actually bleeding. So some people think this is the end of their cycle, but we've come to find out this is actually the beginning of the cycle, but it's when you are shedding your old uterine lining if the egg that was released has not been fertilized. After menstruation, you go into the follicular phase, which is when estrogen is on the rise and your body starts preparing the uterine lining for a new egg to be released and possible fertilization and pregnancy. So this phase typically lasts until it lasts the first 2 weeks of your period, and then you have ovulation. And ovulation typically happens mid-cycle or day 14-ish, and ovulation is actually when an egg is released from the ovary, mature egg, and the egg is also maturing in the follicular phase. So a mature egg is released from the ovary and into the fallopian tubes to possibly be fertilized. So this window when the egg is released is when you are fertile. It's your fertile window. So if you were to have unprotected sex during this period, your fertile window when you're ovulating, you would most likely get pregnant. You can tell you're ovulating, and it's actually really cool, and it's something that I love to track myself, but you can tell you're ovulating two ways. Typically you have a mucus discharge or a vaginal discharge when you're ovulating, and it's more like a goopy egg white consistency, and it's something that is definitely noticeable if you pay attention to your underwear, when you're going to the bathroom or something like that. But it's really cool to see. So when you're ovulating, you have this more goopy discharge. Nothing to be afraid of or grossed out about. I think it's cool. But what else is cool is when you're ovulating, your body temperature also rises. So if you're familiar with the fertility awareness method, this is actually how you can track your fertility, by using your body temperature, because during ovulation, your body temperature will rise due to hormone fluctuations. So if you track your temperature throughout the month, you can actually see when your temperature rises is when you are ovulating. After ovulation, you have the luteal phase. So this is when progesterone rises, and estrogen is also still there, and it continues the development of your uterine lining, and then progesterone will drop. And when this drop in progesterone happens, you then something signals to your body, hey, we're not pregnant, and you again shed your uterine lining that has been building up for possible pregnancy. So the uterine lining is what actually causes the bleed. So you're actually, if you imagine your uterus, it's kind of like this shape inside of your womb space. So the uterine lining is actually where the fertilized egg will implant itself. So throughout your period, you're actually building up this lining as like a little nest or a little home for your possible baby if you were to get pregnant. But when you don't get pregnant, there's a signal in your body that says, hey, we're not pregnant, get rid of this, and you shed your uterine lining, causing you to have a monthly bleed. So that's kind of like a rough overview of what exactly is your period, and I'm sure things aren't super exact, kind of just my view of it or what I've gathered so far. And in a lot of other cultures, women are actually given off of work when they're bleeding. So in some cultures, a lot of women will gather in circles or in groups when they're on their period, because it's a sacred time. It's time to look inward and be reflective and let go of things that are no longer benefiting you, to make room for new. So it can be viewed as a very beautiful and powerful thing, especially as a female. And the way that I like to look at it, and there also is a lot of information out there about your mood and kind of how you present yourself in the world at different stages of your cycle. So typically around your bleed, you are more inverted and reclusive and reflective and less outwardly expressive, and you kind of just want to spend more time by yourself and journaling and thinking. Whereas when you're closer to ovulation and ovulating in your cycle, you're more likely to be outwardly expressive, and you can actually communicate verbally better when you're ovulating. There's some studies out there that show that women can actually express themselves better verbally when they're ovulating. You're more confident, you feel sexier, and you have higher sex drive when you're ovulating. And that's just really interesting. You can kind of tap into these different energies and set time aside when you're ovulating to say, okay, I'm going to work on this creative project and maybe have a job interview this time, and maybe not do those more outwardly expressive things when it is your time of the month. So you can really tap into this energy and use it as a superpower. And I know one of the main reasons why a lot of people kind of demonize the period or the monthly cycle is because of PMS. And I can tell you personally that I've had my fair share of PMS, and I still have some PMS here and there. And I've been working on it myself personally to kind of bring all of my hormones into balance to get rid of PMS, because what I've learned over the years is that PMS is not normal, and to have extremely heavy bleeding for weeks at a time, really awful cramping, extremely tender breasts, mood swings, migraines, you can't get out of bed, you're extremely sensitive and tender. All of these extreme aspects of a period or of a woman's cycle that are the reason why people hate it so much are not normal, and they're so normalized in our society. And typically, if you go to your primary care doctor or your gynecologist and you're like, hey, I'm experiencing these issues, like, what can I do? Typically, they will prescribe you the birth control pill, but what I have learned is that the birth control pill is not the answer to get rid of your PMS. The reason why we PMS is because we actually have excess estrogen. Now, estrogen isn't a bad thing when it is in the right balance with progesterone. But when we have excess estrogen, which a lot of women and men have nowadays, it can cause an imbalance, which can cause symptoms like PMS, specifically cramping, heavy bleeding, acne, migraines, breast tenderness, mood swings, anxiety, depression. The list goes on and on. But I'm sure I will be sharing more about my personal excess estrogen journey and lowering that myself. But there is hope, and I think it's really important to know that PMS is not normal, and it is something that we can work on to get rid of and make our period more manageable and use it as I believe what it's intended to be, which is a superpower. Dr. Laura Brydon, she writes the Period Repair Manual. She considers your monthly cycle to be your monthly report card. So depending on the health of your cycle, and if you're experiencing really awful PMS, or if you're not ovulating, or if you're not bleeding regularly, that could be a sign that there is something more wrong with your health than meets the eye, that there's something going on underneath the surface that needs to be looked at. And I think that's a really awesome way to look at our periods as a monthly report card, something that we can check in with and make sure is in check, because if not, we know that our hormones are most likely out of balance, and hormones play a bigger role in our overall well-being than we come to realize, because they are these chemical messengers that are telling our body to do all of these different things, and our body constantly wants to maintain homeostasis. It wants to be in balance. And when something is too high, for example, if estrogen is too high, or you have too much estrogen, the hormone estrogen in your body, our bodies are going to kind of counterbalance that by lowering something else like progesterone, and that can cause an issue. But same with your stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. If those are high, something is going to take a hit on the other side. Our body constantly wants to be in balance, so if something is high or low, something is going to counteract that on the other side. And I could talk about hormones forever, but this was mainly about our periods. So I hope that you guys found this video informative, and I really hope that I talked about everything I wanted to talk about. And I look forward to talking with you all soon. If you haven't done so yet, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos on women's health.